And now, the CEO of Cardlytics, Mr. Scott Grimes.
Hello, my name is Scott Grimes. I'm the CEO of Cardlytics. You know, about 3 years ago, I was up on this stage presenting as one of the TAG Top 10 companies. About 400 banks later and hundreds of millions of customers, we're now excited to be here today as a sponsor of this terrific event. Yeah, and I'm privileged today to be introducing Mr. Matt Quinlan, who is the CTO of Visa. You know, today's theme is the global commerce revolution. And Visa, as the world's leading payment company, is really one of the leaders in making this global commerce revolution happen. Matt is responsible for setting Visa's technology strategy, and importantly, making that strategy a reality across Visa's massive global technology operation. Matt became Visa's CTO in 2008. Prior to that, he joined Visa in 2003 as the CIO for their international operations. Matt is from the Down Under. Prior to Visa, he worked with a number of great technology companies, including Boral, Bay Networks, and Hypertech. I'm privileged to bring to this stage Mr. Matt Quinlan.
Good morning, and thank you. My name is Matt Quinlan. It is my privilege to be the CTO of Visa, an incredible company. And we're going to show and share a little bit about what Visa stands for. But before I get to that, it really is my pleasure to be here today and speak at this technology summit. I must admit, my accent notwithstanding, yes, I'm not from here. A lot of people last night I had the opportunity to spend a bit of time with were trying to guess where my accent came from. I've lived on 4 continents so far, so it morphs depending on where I am. But what was interesting to me is the people that were asking me about my accent were surprised that I had an accent. The people who were asking me had incredibly interesting accents from my perspective. But what really struck me about last night and about today and about everybody in this room is the passion that you all have around a unified vision for Atlanta, for Georgia. This common goal that you have, the way that you all talk about it, came out in every single interaction that I had, and I think that is something that is quite unique. I haven't really discovered that in many other parts of the world or in the United States. So credit to Tino and his team for creating this forum and for creating this community. I think it's first class. And the results show for themselves. The presentation that we saw on the state of the nation or the state of the industry here, some of those incredible statistics, particularly ones that are relevant to our industry, transaction processing, 70% of transactions processed here. I didn't know that. I had no idea. What I can tell you, and hopefully I'll share a little bit of, is why that happens and how we play a role in that. So we're very proud to be part of that. But technology is not necessarily the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Visa. And I'd like to do just a very quick audience poll. It's not going to be painful. It's going to be very easy. Simple show of hands. Who has or has had or has used a traditional Visa product, being a plastic card? Just a quick show of hands. Okay, that's pretty consistent with my expectation. Just a quick second question. Who has used a more recent or modern Visa product or service, a digital wallet, a mobile-based service, near-field communications? A lot less. So there's an opportunity for us. But the first question that we typically get about Visa is, what is Visa? And what I'd like to submit to you is that Visa is a payments technology company at its heart. We have a global processing network. We're going to share a little bit about how big that is, centered around a platform called VisaNet. You'll hear VisaNet a lot in my presentation. And really it is the engine, it's the heart, the soul of what allows us to power commerce in countries around the globe. It's a key enabler of the global migration from cash and check to electronic forms of payment. Picking up on Bob's analog to digital conversion, that's what we're doing in the payments industry. The correlation between that activity economic growth, developing economies, is undeniable. It's proven time and time again these days. And VisaNet is at the heart of that, and it's effectively a technology platform. Visa is based in San Francisco. We have major facilities, major operations in Miami, in Singapore, and obviously in Silicon Valley. And we're just a little north of 8,000 employees worldwide. That's 8,000, not 80,000. So we have a big brand. We probably had about 70 to 80% of the people in this room respond that they've had some experience with Visa, but we're 8,000 people. 5 years ago, we were less than 6,000 people. We've made a few acquisitions in our latest form. So we're a small company. I like Bob's analogy, we're a small company. I look at us as a startup company. And we've changed our form significantly in the last 5 or 6 years, from when I started with a company out in Asia to where we are today. But we still look at ourselves as a small company, and we feel that we have an entrepreneurial spirit with technology at the heart, and this thing called VisaNet, which really powers that. So we're driving global growth, economic growth, through the conversion of check and cash to electronic forms of payment. And at the heart of it, we have I guess a slogan, a catch cry that we're known by. We want to be the best way to pay and the best way to be paid for everyone, everywhere. And those last two pieces I'm going to talk about a little bit more as we go through the presentation, because it's changing the dynamic. And we have an incredible business today, but the everyone, everywhere piece of that is where you're going to see, I think, some of our innovation agenda coming to the fore. So we continue to try and remove friction from the commerce channels around the world, and again, enabling that shift. And we invest not only in our traditional network, the VisaNet platform itself, but we're investing in new technologies for ourselves, obviously, to promote our own products and services. Things like mobile. We're partnering with some of the leading mobile industry players, extending the benefits of e-com and electronic commerce to new constituents around the world and new forms of electronic payment. And again, this gets to more people in more places, thinking back to one of the previous presentations on how many mobile devices there are on the planet today. That first truly ubiquitous platform is probably with us today. Now, whilst we do that, we also recognize the opportunity that we have to address folks around the planet that don't have access to basic financial services. There are 2.5 billion people on the planet, billion adults on the planet today, that don't have access to the most basic financial services that we all take for granted in many cases. Savings accounts, payments capabilities, insurance, any of the normal things, loans that we take advantage of. 2.5 billion adults on the planet don't have any access for them today. And so they're financially excluded from many things that we enjoy, and that makes their lives very difficult. It's not that they don't want to and don't have needs exactly the same as we all do, to be able to transact, to be able to pay, to be able to save, generate wealth, but they have to do that through up to 7 or 8 different cash, high-risk, highly inconvenient methods every day. So every day they're using a combination of different ways to do things based on cash, and it makes their lives very difficult. They want to do exactly the same thing that people in mature economies do. So we're investing heavily in technologies to extend the reach of our current network and to basically bring more people into this financial inclusion paradigm, which we think is beneficial, again, and it powers economies, drives economic growth. Now, we do that with some key tenets of what VisaNet and Visa stands for, which may surprise you. Visa, at its heart, again, the key attributes that we define are security, reliability, and trust. Now, the first two, security and reliability, spin up into all kinds of conversations around technology. Trust is something that we earn over a long period of time because at the end of the day, we're handling your financials for you. So reaching billions of financially excluded people with those secure, reliable financial services is actually within reach. We can see it today, we can see it starting to happen, and we think that's going to accelerate. And so it's a shared goal of not just us, of course, but governments, non-government agencies, and the private sector across the globe. So I mentioned mobile, and that's probably one of the most significant drivers of this financial inclusion that we're starting to see. And again, bringing the unbanked consumers and giving them access to formal financial services for the first times in their lives. In developed countries, just switching gears for a second, like the US, Canada, Australia, we're partnering with particularly mobile technology providers, creating new and interesting possibilities and different ways of transacting more along the traditional network line, but providing new opportunities, new ways to do things. Network operators, device manufacturers are working closely with us to provide these services, and it's really extending the reach of the network beyond the traditional stakeholder community in the payments industry. Visa will continue to obviously invest and drive in its core network. We're going to come back to that network effect. Bob set this up perfectly for me because you'll see some statistics which suggest that we may follow Metcalfe's law, although I've never done the math, but we're probably following that. And we're going to continue to position that network and position ourselves so that others can innovate around the network and take advantage of all the attributes that you get with the network. So we have a commitment, and quite frankly, given our position in the industry globally, an obligation to lead the way and ensure that as the innovation happens around our network, as innovation helps us extend the network and provide services to new constituents, that they're done in a responsible manner, developing solutions, again, with a high degree of security, reliability, and the scale that consumers come to expect. So we've been at this for quite a while. And this is the slide that I think, and again, I haven't run the math, but if you think about our 50-year history, probably approximates Metcalfe's law. So we started back in sort of the late 50s, 60s, 70s, and as you can see, we had 29,000 card holders back then. It was a US-based operation. It was an experiment to start with, let's be honest. It was an experiment. But we've invested in this network to the point now where you can see numbers which are dating back to 2011 on this slide, but now are approximating $6 trillion in throughput and somewhere around $2 billion cards in force across the globe. And you think about that community of people connected by something which is common, being Visa. There aren't many communities on the planet which approximate that level. The advantage or the opportunity for us really is to take that and extend that to the next billion or 2 billion people that can take advantage of this capability. But we've been at this for about 50 years, and we have a history of innovation. Some of it you'll be familiar with, some of it you won't. Back in 1970, we started life as something called Bank Americard. And in fact, we have systems today still called Base 1 and Base 2. Now, BASE stands for Bank Americard Systems Experiment Number 1. Could we build an authorization switch? We still have that today. We call it Base 1. And Base 2 is basically Bank Americard Systems Experiment Number 2. And that's the clearing and settlement system. We still love those systems. They're with us today. They're clearly being re-engineered and modernized over the long haul. But along the way, we've made some fairly significant investments. In 1974, we brought to life the first electronic authorization system. And this really allowed merchants and banks to connect, merchants to connect with banks to basically authorize transactions, to make sure that this person that you don't know as a merchant is walking into your store, is going to give you something of value, hopefully, and is going to take your products and services with them. You don't know this person, you'll never see them again, but you trust them enough to be able to exchange that kind of value. And that's what the authorization system did back in 1974. Playing forward, we created the world's first ATM network in 1983. And in 1993, we installed one of the most advanced neural networks at the time to basically help address fraudulent transactions across the network. These investments, these innovations have been a constant source of sort of investment for Visa over the long term. About 10 years ago, we started to re-engineer these systems. Again, still calling them Base 1 and Base 2 because we love that. But we started to re-engineer and modernize those systems and really bring them into the modern world. there's a milestone on here which you may find sort of interesting. It's an operating system upgrade. Okay, no big deal, right? For us, it was a very big deal, and it was only completed back in 2009. This is where we took our TPF systems and we moved them from, for the technology people in the world, 32-bit addressing to 64-bit addressing. You may say we were late to the game, but we did that very carefully, and we were actually the first company on the planet to take advantage of those new operating systems. Now, that in itself was pretty interesting. These systems are running at phenomenal rates. We've just celebrated, I hope this is wood, touch wood, 19 years of peak season availability with 0 downtime. We don't tolerate downtime, and we engineer around that. So changing and transplanting the heart and soul of these engines in flight, and nobody ever knew about it, was quite a feat. But that was the interesting technology side. What that really allowed us to do is some incredibly interesting things. We can now, we're capable of processing in excess of 24,000 transactions per second, sustained. But what we can do with those transactions now is quite interesting, because we can put these on these new platforms. We can enrich those transactions. We can do in-flight processing. And as I'll share in a minute, this all happens in a very, very small period of time. And these are real transactions. These are transactions where you are trying to do something. You have committed to spend money to create a transaction, and you're going to stand there and wait till it comes back. This is a very different transaction set to what you will see in some of the social areas, whether it's search or other sort of social-oriented transactions engines who can equally process at this level. But one of the statistics I find interesting is in the search business, 1 in 4 transactions today results in the back button. I didn't get what I want. Ray will be here later and probably can tell us how he's going to solve that problem with Google. Have you ever seen the second page of a Google results sheet? No, I mean, nobody looks, right? You just go back again. That would be a really bad day in our industry if 1 in 4 of your transactions resulted in something that you had to go and do again. So these transactions for us and our ability to add value to those transactions at incredible levels is something that we've invested heavily in. In 2013, we made some strategic acquisitions to move us closer to the mobile space, in some cases directly into mobile. We bought a company in South Africa, and we've now integrated that company, which provides mobile-based banking and mobile payment services to feature phones, not the smartphones that most people carry here, but SMS-based USSD phones. People can now transact and are starting to move the cash economy into the electronic economy using this ubiquitous device called a mobile phone. And what we're doing, you'll see increasingly, is we're providing these services in the same way that Visa has always provided its services, which is a managed service. This is not easy to do. If you buy into the reliability, the security, and the scale issues, this is not easy to do. We've built this capability over 50 years, and now we're starting to extend the network. So if we think about that, past, present, and the future, what you have here is that sort of represented. Back in Fresno, California, I think this was 1957, this picture is from, on the left-hand side of the screen there, authorizations were manual. We like to look at this picture and say that those big, thick binders that you have on the table, that's the original big data. You probably wouldn't want to try and do a manual authorization at 24,000 times per second now on a sustained basis. I don't think there's enough paper or people on the planet that would be able to get through that. And we do this for everything today. We buy a cup of coffee or we buy a refrigerator on a credit or a debit or a prepaid card. So advancing those systems to what you see on the right-hand side, which is a snapshot of one of our 3 global network operations centers, really shows the progression that we've been on. And again, as I said, 24,000 transactions per second is interesting, and they're real transactions. Those transactions can involve an advanced series of information-based sort of analytics, scoring, and other sort of fraud detection pieces. And it doesn't matter where on the planet that you want to do that. You could have a consumer in Russia working with a merchant based out of Africa with a bank backing them out of Brazil, and we can handle that transaction in well under 2 seconds on a sustainable basis. So our network today spans the globe in every sense and supports electronic payments in countries of all different kinds. It is the largest electronic retail network in the world today, supporting both domestic programs such as Brazil. We run the domestic processing for Brazil, as well as international transactions. Our facilities, some of them that are depicted up here, are synchronized in real time globally at all times and provide instant failover. Again, this is almost dial tone. It's expected to be there all the time. And at those transaction rates, it really has to be there. We're virtualizing applications across the globe, and it gives us the centralized, so synchronized, but globally, a global view of commerce at any point in time in real time, gives us a very interesting purview on what's happening in the globe. Millions of acceptance locations. That's about 40 million. We don't put the number on there because it changes all the time. Now, acceptance in the traditional sense is when you have one of these pieces of plastic and you walk up to a terminal, you slide the card, that's what acceptance has been. Today, acceptance comes in so many different forms, whether it's mobile-based, whether it's NFC. Square, one of our great partners, is opening up acceptance locations across the globe into new and interesting areas. So we gave up writing the number because as soon as we print it, it's out of date. 80 billion transactions processed. These are transactions that carry money. There's a lot of other transactions that go on the network as well, but we count the 80 billion a year, and in fact, it's grown from there, that we carry, which carries 6.3 or 6.4, approximately 6.4 trillion US dollars of value every year. 175 currencies, 150 million transactions a day. And again, these are big numbers, but we do these, that's an average, so we obviously do a lot more than that on a regular basis as well. We get through those in about 1 second, and we are connected to around 15,000 financial institutions. We sit at the core, we are that network in the middle of that, across those 15,000 financial institutions. And the capacity for the 24,000, I keep on coming back to that because it's an interesting number. It is not gated by anything that we can see today. We've chosen to put a certain amount of horsepower hardware on the floor, and we test this every day in a non-production environment, every year. We run off to one of our key partners. We rebuild the entire system. We run transactions through it until it breaks. And then we go and double the hardware and see where it breaks. And it's a linear equation. So we don't see any limit in sight in the near term to be able to double and triple that. In fact, some of the gateways that we run, the gateways that bring the transactions in and then go out again, those gateways see each transaction 4 times. So they are running at somewhere near 96,000 transactions per second on a sustained basis. And again, this is a real transaction. This is a transaction that if you're standing there buying a $10 hamburger, or $5 hamburger, expensive one if it's 10, you're going to wait until that transaction completes. Whereas if you're doing a search or some other sort of socially oriented transaction, if it doesn't happen exactly the way you wanted it, you just do it again. So we've got to make sure that these transactions carry all the integrity of what you come to expect from Visa. But our growth opportunity is still immense. These are impressive numbers, $6 trillion worth of value going through the system. But the growth and the opportunity ahead of us is equally impressive. More and more people are abandoning cash and check for electronic forms of payment. Today, for every $100 of personal consumption expenditure on your coffees and your refrigerators and everything in between that you're buying, $20 of that 100 globally is on a Visa product or service today. So that's a good news. More importantly, though, we have significant growth. There is still around $13 trillion addressable in the cash and check space. Now, there's an inherent benefit. People are understanding, governments are understanding the benefit of moving towards electronic forms of payment. And so our future and our opportunity to participate in that incredible opportunity is quite apparent. So at the heart of it, what do? When we talk about transactions, let's break that down a little bit for you. Transaction processing, risk management, and information are the 3 key applications, if you like, that run across VisaNet. The act of authorizing a transaction is, again, letting that unknown person go into an unknown shop and exchange value with trust and security very quickly and make sure that the transaction and the financials can follow from that. Clearing and settlement is the act of then moving the money, right? Transactions flowing across the network are settled and netted out at the end of a day. Process today can be in real time if people want to do that. Again, at an incredible rate and incredible value. Online dispute, not everything goes exactly as you expected. When you buy something, if it's not what you wanted, not what you expected, then you have to be able to back that out. So the dispute resolution system, again, hopefully not 1 in 4 transactions are disputed, but that dispute resolution system is, again, a scaled, massive infrastructure and application that allows us to handle when things don't go 100% according to plan. So that's the horsepower. The 300 payments applications running across this landscape are making that happen. Risk management services is a key. And again, this comes back to our ability to do things with a transaction in flight by adding value to it and really scoring those transactions. We have a service called Advanced Authorization, which uses historical data to look for patterns, look for fraud patterns, look for transactions that may be potentially bad, and score those in real time as they're flying through the system at 24,000 per second. That's not easy to do. That result, that advanced authorization score goes out to the bank and they make a decision based on whether they think this is good or bad. Again, the centralized global view of data allows us to do that. This constantly synchronized view of data allows us to detect events, we call them rare events, very early in the cycle, potentially pre-detect something, looking across different card holders, looking across different merchants, different banks across the globe, and trying to detect those things that may look a little bit unusual. The investment in this area, again, starting back in sort of 2005 with advanced authorization, has been pretty intense. And whilst the volume of transactions, the volume of money processed through the systems continues to grow, the fraud rates on those systems or in that industry in our industry has dropped by 2/3 over the same period of time. So today, for every $100 put through the system, there's about 6 cents of potentially fraudulent transactions. We're going to continue to invest in that area as we extend the network and do new things with the network, position the network, and to continue to drive that down. And some of the technology advances that are available to us today, some of the cloud computing concepts that are available today are really helping us to mitigate that. And lastly, information services. The Visa information services really allows us to add value to every transaction, to take that transaction, to augment it with additional value, additional data, again in real time, to drive business intelligence in every way, whether that's reports and analytics, account holder controls, so that you can be in control of the features and how your particular Visa product is used. So to do this, we probably need some pretty big infrastructure. We heard some statistics, and I think QTS was one of the representatives here today talking about some pretty impressive data center facilities that they have right here. And we operate 3 data centers worldwide. 2 are in the United States, and a different processing center is available to us outside of the United States. But they weren't always that way. When we started life, we had 1 data center. Again, this was an experiment, so we didn't want to put too much money into it. The experiment has proven successful, we think. 1 data center, basic authorization, response system, single currency. If you came to us with US dollars, that was good. If you tried to come to us with anything else, that was not so good. No currency conversion. And a hub and spoke architecture connecting the banks to VisaNet. As life changed, we moved to some of the more advanced capabilities, multiple data centers, as I mentioned, but single global image. And that's critical for us. That's key. That wherever transactions come into in any of our centers and any of the multiple images that we run within those centers to make sure that Visa is always available, always reliable and performing at scale, we maintain a single global image. And if you play that back into the data conversation, having that global view of data at those rates and being able to do things like advanced authorization, it is key to our success. Centralized processing architecture, seamless failover. The worst you should ever experience, not that you have yet, 19 years and counting, during peak, the worst you should ever experience is a retry on a transaction. That's it. And that should happen within about 1.2 seconds if it's not going to come back. There's a lot of other things happening around the network before it gets to Visa that are obviously subject to different parameters, but really the failover within our centers, within our images, is literally real-time and seamless. Global systems monitoring, we manage these systems from 3 different locations on the globe. Any one location can manage the entire global footprint. Any one processing location and any one image within those global processing locations can again handle the entire globe traffic at any point in time. And moving forward, we're still investing in these systems, and we're basically at a system plus system data center design. Today, our flagship data center, which was opened, I think, in 2009, is about 370,000 square feet. It was the first LEED Silver certified data center in the country. That's no mean feat for a data center when you think about what they do. But we managed to build this data center, and we operate this data center based on a sustainable basis, and we achieved LEED certification, again, first in the US. Give you an example, it's a 42-acre plot of land. The roof of that building, it's a single-level building, is 8 acres in size, which is big, but it also gives us a great opportunity to catch all the water that falls on it and recycle that. On premises, a 1.5 million gallon chilling, a water containment plant that we use for chilling. It's all recycled, it's well-based, so we're not drawing anything from the grid. We have 4 concrete encased conduits coming into the 42 acres to bring in power. And in addition to that, we have self-generation capabilities, enough power to be generated by the data center to power a town of about 25,000 homes at any given point in time, and we can do that on a sustained basis. We don't use that very often. The reliability on the grids are very good, but we do have it there to make sure that Visa is always available for processing. We have similar facilities in other parts of the world, not quite at the same level, but again, all of these are some of the most advanced data centers on the planet. If any of you have been to a data center, they're usually not that interesting. Big buildings, lots of blinking lights. When you actually go to one of our data centers, it's a different experience altogether, and you get an understanding of what it takes to drive 80 billion transactions a year at the levels that we insist on. That's a little bit of how we got to where we are. And I'd ask you to think back about that global slide, the network slide with all the big numbers on there. And I challenge you to think a little bit about the concept of cloud. Cloud is obviously featured as one of Bob's big areas of interest. I do lots of interviews, participate in lots of surveys, and a lot of them about cloud technologies. When you think about that, what I'd ask you to think about is what is the definition of a cloud? And if I asked everybody in this room, all 1,200, we'd probably get about 1,500 different answers to what is the definition of a cloud. But when you think about what Visa is, we actually think we are the quintessential cloud for payments. We started life that way. We only offer products as software as a service. We're massively scaled. So depending on your specific definition, I'd like you to think about Visa as the quintessential payments cloud, the original cloud, and we certainly adopt those technologies within the company as well, but what we offer to the market we think is very much cloud aligned. But the future is equally interesting to our company, obviously. And technology will continue to transform payments, and it's changing the way consumers shop, pay, and get paid across the globe. The internet, some of Bob's original invention, we use a lot of that. If you stretched out all the cabling and bits and pieces, the Ethernet infrastructure that we have in one of our data centers, it would go around the globe. And so we take advantage of that, and we take advantage of the internet, and it's transforming the way things happen. Mobile technologies and social networks are also influencing how we look and how consumers want to interact. And from our perspective, we're not that far from where everyone relies on mobile phones, tablets, PCs, and other connected devices. We heard the stats. There'll be more connected devices on the planet in a very short period of time than there are people. That's something to think about. And we're investing in technologies to basically extend the reach of our global network and give more people access to Visa products and services across the globe. In doing so, we want to position the network, and we've been investing to position the network for all of its inherent capabilities, security, reliability, scale, trust, for others to innovate around, to connect new things to. We're doing that for our own rights, but we're doing that with a lot of other partners because we realize that it's an open innovation ecosystem, and we're seeing that the pace of change, particularly around mobile and non-card-based payments, is accelerating. So whilst we'll play our role in that, one of the biggest things we can do is actually position the benefit of the network itself, VisaNet, allow others to innovate on the edge, create new capabilities, and then take advantage of the network, inherit those capabilities, inherit its attributes, and then bring them into those new products and services that they're offering. And whether it's Visa PayWave, which is the contactless payment application, which enables near-field communications, whether it's on cards or whether it's on phones and smartphones to be used. We've done a lot of work with some of the major telecommunications players and handset manufacturers around the world to enable things like SmartPass in Australia, where again, you just pay by waving your phone. That's going to depend on acceptance infrastructure being upgraded. That's happening today, contactless in different parts of the world and coming to the US as well is starting to feature more and more. The debate on NFC versus other forms of interaction, QR codes, that's going to continue. There's going to be a lot of experimentation around the capabilities that mobile offers today, and we're trying to enable that. We can't predict how that's all going to end, but we will be there, and we'll be the network behind that once it's, the multiple different opportunities emerge, that we'll be enabling that, we'll be powering that using the power of VisaNet to create those new forms of payment. Last month, I mentioned before, we rolled out the Visa Mobile Managed Service. This is a low cost, highly efficient network for mobile operators, banks and micro-lending organizations in developing countries to use to take advantage of mobile-based payment services. Unbanked consumers who don't have a relationship with a financial institution, and quite frankly may never have a relationship with a financial institution, can now take advantage of payments, savings, and other financial instruments that we enjoy. The next billion constituents in our ecosystem, we like to think, will come from that landscape. Out of the 2.5 billion unbanked adults, most of them have cell phones today. Feature phones, not smartphones, but they'll progressively move in that direction. Positioning the network, enabling others to innovate around that network, providing the security, the reliability, the scale. Back to one of Bob's answers, I think, to a question on innovation, how quickly do you scale? What I'd like to suggest is that in many cases, we can offer you scale in this area a lot faster than you would otherwise. Rather than organic scale, you can do that through partnership. And we're actively promoting that as an attribute of how Visa is positioning VisaNet. Now, at the same time as bringing 1 billion people into the ecosystem that don't have financial instruments, nor do they have experience with those instruments. And we think that's a critically important component to educate people on how to use these financial instruments. We have a very active program in the company around financial literacy. For the last decade, we've been talking about and developing financial literacy programs across the globe to teach individuals how to use these facilities, how to be responsible with financial instruments that they've never had an experience with. And we think that's critical. That's absolutely important because we know the horror stories of people going crazy when they've got access to brand new facilities. In fact, Visa pledged to reach 20 million people with financial literacy education programs and toolkits by May 2013. And this was done under part of the Clinton Global Initiative sponsored in 2009. We met that commitment in May 2012, well ahead of schedule. The demand and the acknowledgement for the need for financial literacy and teaching people as they're brought into the ecosystem is quite apparent. And in fact, we're a year ahead. We've touched 26 million folks to date, and we did that by September 2012. And we will continue to invest. And again, you see all kinds of different modes of interaction here drawn from across the globe, whether it's the advanced pay, tap here kind of things, or Square-based things, or different mobile applications that are going to ride on this network in the next 50 years of our history. We're going to be basically central to that and really, really powering. And why do we do this? There was a study published, I think it was this week, which rated Visa as one of the top 10, I think it was position number 6 precisely, trusted brands in the world for what we do. We do that because we have a particular brand promise. Everything that I've just described in terms of our technology, our investment in infrastructure, and quite frankly, our investment in people goes to support that brand promise. To cardholders, we promise the ability to pay safely and securely everywhere you go, in any interaction, safe, reliable, secure. To merchants, we actually guarantee payment. If you accept Visa according to the acceptance criteria and you're part of the connection, we guarantee payment. We guarantee, again, that it's safe, it's secure, it's efficient, every transaction, every time, anywhere on the planet. And to the financial institutions, we promise to continue to provide the most flexible, reliable, and secure payment system, and to reposition that system and constantly evolve that system to drive innovation in our ecosystem and around the edges of that ecosystem, effectively to facilitate that migration from cash and check to electronic forms of payment. Now, brand makes a bold promise, and our technology, quite frankly, is what keeps that promise. So with that, I thank you, and would like to open up for questions.
I realize that the smartphone tap is the way you want to go in the future. But in the meantime, there are a lot of places in Europe that require cards that have an embedded chip that authorizes the transaction. We don't use that, to my knowledge, in the States, but when we go over there, we got to have a card with a chip. So what are you doing to enable that?
It's an excellent question. So just addressing the United States is moving towards chip. There is a mandate today, not just Visa's, but industry mandate, to move to chip-based card technology. And whether that turns up as a phone or whether it turns up in the card, it will eventually be both. And the reason for that is chip is a proven technology across the globe to drive down counterfeit fraud. When you drive down counterfeit fraud in one part of the world, it moves to another part of the world. So we need to continue to stamp that out. There is no reason in Europe, other than some educational challenges that Europe had when they went to chip and PIN, that your existing MAG Stripe card issued in the United States won't work. It does still work there, although they do have chip. There's a different risk profile, but you can still use your card globally, and that's important. And you can argue with the checkout person who says you can't use a card because it will work, guaranteed. But chip will come to the US, whether it's contactless, near field, whether it's, we call it a dip, put the chip into a reader. It offers additional levels of security, additional levels of authentication, a different processing opportunity because it's obviously an intelligent device other than the traditional MAG Stripe, which is static. So it is coming to the United States.
My name is Vicki Hudson. My question is more about the people side of technology. In my work, I do cross-cultural training for global teams and offshore teams. And a lot of the technology makes us feel maybe a false sense of security that cultural differences and things like that have flattened out. I saw from your bio all the different places in the world that you've worked and the offshore development centers and so on. I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
It's a great question, and I think it's critically important. So I'm from Australia, and I've spent more than 10 years of my life on 4 different continents, 10 years apiece. I have 2 children who are 14 and 16. They've lived on 3 continents already in their lives. The cultural differences and the cultural challenges of operating a global business like ours are very apparent, and you should never ignore them. When we built the technology hubs that we have in Singapore, when we consolidated the technology hubs we have here in the US, we invested heavily in programs to bring the cultures together and teach people how to talk to each other and appreciate the different cultural backgrounds. Our investment in technology is one thing, our investment in people is the other thing. And the cultural aspects of that are absolutely critical. More and more we're seeing that the collaboration tools, the collaboration techniques, some of the things that we saw earlier are critical to that as well and very enabling. The ability simply to talk to somebody via some sort of video capability, and see body language, see reaction. It's an incredible different dimension. We've all spoken about video conferencing forever, but when you actually start to see that at a very organic level, desk-based level, the relationships that form and the cultural understanding and awareness that you can build through those collaboration techniques, again, sponsored with some top-down driven sort of change management, operational change, organizational change management programs, can deliver fantastic results, never to be underestimated.
Hi, I can imagine that one of the fastest growing segments of your business is internet payments. And in Visa terms, it's considered card not present. But when you talk about Visa guarantees payment to the merchant, that doesn't apply to card not present transactions. You put the responsibility onto the business to screen for fraud. So can you describe what you're doing to help mitigate the card not present fraud problem?
So card not present is an interesting environment. In fact, we do guarantee payment to internet-based services, provided there are certain things done, like verified by Visa. There are additional steps that we deploy, additional technologies that the merchants can take advantage of to limit liability. If they do nothing, then obviously it's an inherently higher risk proposition, and so the guarantees change a little bit, but it is available. But the the card not present environment is getting very interesting, because a card is effectively a credential. It's been around for a long time. I get one, it's through a very orchestrated process with a financial institution, a lot of checks and balances, and so they know that it's my card. And I use that and everything's okay. If you play forward to NFC or mobile, right, there's no card really available. I could take my phone and tap it against a PayWave device. Is that a card present or a card not present? Well, the reality is there's a credential on that phone which has gone through an exhaustive credentialing process, and again, that helps to eliminate risk and mitigate risk from that transaction. But is it card present? Well, you can't really claim that. So we're starting to change the dialogue a little bit to more consumer present versus consumer not present. So there are different techniques, there are different options available to merchants to mitigate and to limit their liability in a transaction, and quite frankly, if they're doing some pretty basic things, the risk is quite acceptable today. It's the fastest growing segment. E-com transactions is the fastest growing segment on the planet. So we see this is going to merge. We see this is going to become very interesting as we move down NFCs, mobile-based payments, and we'll continue to offer those sort of screening capabilities. Last question, I have 2 minutes left. And I have 3 people lined up. Sorry about that.
Phew, I just got in. So I was just curious if I could hear your take on some of the disruptive companies like Square and how you feel them, where you see them fitting in from the overall infrastructure and sort of ecology of transactions.
We think they're fascinating. We think that innovation driven through players like Square is fantastic. Square has bought, and I don't know the current number, Andy, do you know? Hundreds of thousands of new acceptance points, new merchants into the ecosystem. The transaction still needs the security, the reliability, and the scale of the processing network. So Square actually brings in new innovative ways. They're also enriching and enhancing transactions, and again, the centralized data architecture, centralized processing architecture that we have can support what Square is trying to do. There's lots of opportunity for disruption in the industry, but at the heart of it, that security and reliability, the scale that the VisaNet network offers is something that a lot of players are taking advantage of. We're integrating all kinds of different players like Square into the network. We're providing access to the network through APIs and developer centers. We actively want to encourage that level of innovation around the ecosystem. We can't do it ourselves. We're 8,000 people. But we can take those core assets, those attributes of VisaNet that we've built over 50 years and make them available for others to innovate around. And we really think that that's the way of the future. So I have big red letters here. With that, I'll close, and I thank you very much.